Meeting place with my boss. Even after the scheduled time passed, my boss was nowhere to be seen. Man, he's late. That's what I thought as I looked towards the station. Then, I spotted a little girl crying, squatting in front of the station. At first glance, she seemed to be about 5 years old. I guessed she was probably lost or something. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I asked her in the gentlest voice I could. I couldn't just leave her alone in a place like this. I decided to help her find her mom. As it turned out, this incident would lead to a significant change in my life. I'm in a company with no future, with lousy bosses. Happiness was waiting down the road. My name is Michael Johnson, 30 years old. I'm a company employee. As for my workplace, I work in a trading company that deals in luxury goods. Our main product is alcohol, but recently, due to the changing demands, we've been interacting more with Japanese manufacturers. I joined this Japanese-focused company because I was originally good at Japanese. So working with these Japanese manufacturers has always been enjoyable for me. To be honest, I was never much interested in alcohol, but I found joy in working with Japanese. Looking back, Japanese has always been a part of my life. The first thing that sparked my interest in Japanese was Japanese movies. Ever since I was a kid, I somehow preferred watching Japanese movies and dramas. Before I even recognized Japanese as a subject to study, I had been exposed to it from a young age without any resistance. Maybe it was just the coolness of Japanese films that I felt vaguely, or maybe it was the exaggerated gestures of Japanese actors that I found amusing. Anyway, when everyone else was starting to get into Hannah Montana, I was all about anime. Then, a bit of time passed, and it was during my high school years that I became much closer to Japanese. At this time, I became obsessed with game streaming. But not US game streaming, it was Japanese. Japanese game streaming often involved intense emotional fluctuations and dynamic gameplay. I was always amazed by their intensity, and it was fun and exhilarating to watch. I spent my study breaks watching these streamers' videos. This must have contributed to my leap in Japanese proficiency. After all, unlike movies, these streaming videos didn't come with subtitles, so I had to understand them at their natural speaking speed. It's true what they say. Practice makes perfect. Throughout my high school graduation and university studies, constantly being immersed in Japanese greatly improved my language skills. By the time I became an adult, I had become quite proficient in speaking it. This is the journey that led me to where I am today. But a few years into my job, I slowly started to develop an interest in our company's products, alcohol and snacks. It's natural to become knowledgeable about your work, but I began to feel the charm of the world of alcohol. So, lately, I've been finding my job enjoyable in many ways. However, even in this enjoyable job, there are unpleasant aspects. One of them is the presence of a certain employee. He's my boss, Smith, and he has a notably arrogant attitude. Whenever he gives instructions, he often does so silently, just pointing at people. Moreover, when someone asked a question, he would treat them as if he expected them to understand without having to say anything, bossing people around. I'm sure all his subordinates have experienced this kind of treatment. I, too, am often bossed around and end up being saddled with menial tasks. Naturally, we all have a lot of complaints about him. Yet, since Mr. Smith is our boss, we can complain and just have to endure it, I guess. Then, one day, something unfortunate happened to me. I was assigned to go on a business trip with Mr. Smith. It was a bit of a sudden schedule, and since this task was already decided, I couldn't help but have a bad feeling about it. Man, this is really weighing on my mind. I was filled with this heavy feeling even before going. Unfortunately, my premonition turned out to be right. On the way back from the business meeting, he dumped all the paperwork for the day on me. Despite having told the client with a smile, "We'll handle everything," Mr. Smith decided to leave it all to me with just a word, "Hey, get the documents done by today." I tried asking, all by myself, but was met with, "Of course." To top it off, he left on time to go drinking with his friends. Mr. Smith always dumps his work on his subordinates and leaves. Moreover, even during work hours, he does nothing but nag and harass us. He's not the type to work diligently. So I was already frustrated with Mr. Smith, who hardly does his job properly. The instructions that day were particularly infuriating. Then, on the day of the second business meeting, Mr. Smith appeared at the meeting place, looking all spry, but he only engaged in small talk with the other company's executives and didn't participate in the meeting at all. Ultimately, I was left to handle the difficult negotiations. Honestly, the other company's boss was behaving just like Mr. Smith. The person from the other company conducting the meeting was also dismayed at their boss. We're in the same boat. We sighed together. However, this meeting went very well. Being in the same boat, the other party and I were able to empathize with each other. After the business meeting, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I did it. But a shocking despair awaited me next, when I went to report to the department head upon returning to the company. Unbelievably, Mr. Smith, with a smug look, said, "Oh man, I really worked hard." Frozen in disbelief at his sudden bragging, I thought, what? He, who had only engaged in small talk, seemed to have no right to say such a thing. Yet, unaware of my feelings, he continued laughing and talking. Listening to him, it sounded as if he was claiming the success of the negotiation as all his own doing. That was just too much. It wasn't just stealing credit. I thought about refuting on the spot, but would anyone believe me if I did? Worse, what if they thought I was a troublesome employee? Concerned about my position, I lacked the courage to speak up and decided to remain silent this time. Many people might think, just consult with another supervisor or speak up bravely. But that didn't seem like a good strategy for me, because the employees in this company aren't exactly close to each other. In other words, the company is too large, not just in sales and marketing, but also in transportation and importation. The company's foundation is quite solid, but that also means that those in positions of power, who have climbed the career ladder, are completely unaware of the situation of those below them. Many don't know the actual field work at all. Therefore, it's not uncommon for those in higher positions to give unreasonable orders. In such a situation, what would happen if a regular employee like me talked back? It's clear that it would worsen my standing in the company. This is the current state of our company. A company where people who think they are competent look down on others, becoming arrogant. The humanity of the people within the company seems to worsen day by day. Mr. Smith, my supervisor, is one of them. While the work is enjoyable, there are days filled with dissatisfaction due to interpersonal relationships and work treatment. I gloomily work every day. Then, one day, another matter came up. Once again, I was assigned to a business meeting with Mr. Smith, and as expected, most of the work was pushed onto me. In addition to regular duties, preparing for Mr. Smith's business meeting was extremely difficult, both physically and mentally draining. But no matter how much dissatisfaction builds up, time marches on. The day of the negotiation arrived quickly. On that day, I stood at the entrance of the park near the station with a heavy heart. This was the location I had previously arranged to meet Mr. Smith, as it was important not to be late for the crucial business meeting. We had agreed to meet here at 1300 hours. I had been waiting for 15 minutes. Although I arrived 15 minutes early, Mr. Smith was nowhere to be seen even after the scheduled time had passed. Moreover, when I tried calling him, there was no response. I wondered what could have happened. If something had gone wrong, my anxiety grew steadily. But if some emergency occurred, I would have been contacted. With no news, I guessed I should continue to wait. Trying to suppress my anxiety, I decided to wait a little longer. At that moment, in the almost empty park in front of the station where Smith was nowhere to be seen, I noticed a little girl crying quietly. It was a weekday midday, and there were hardly any people around. The crying girl looked to be about 5 years old, the age of a preschooler. Could she be lost? There didn't seem to be any family nearby. Seeing the young girl squatting and crying alone, I couldn't bring myself to leave her there. I approached her slowly and decided to speak to her. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I asked gently and calmly. Then, after looking at me, the girl said through her tears, "I got separated from Mom." It seemed she really was lost. I couldn't just leave her there. Unfortunately, my boss hadn't shown up, and there was no contact from him. Since there was still time before the meeting, I decided to help her look for her mother. When did you get separated from Mom? I asked while trying to soothe the crying girl. Apparently, she had gotten off at a different station from her mother and ended up here. It was strange that she got off at the wrong station, especially when the trains weren't that crowded. A curious feeling overcame me. While looking for her mother, the girl asked various questions. What do you do for work? What are your hobbies and favorite food? Have you ever argued with your parents? And so on. Although they were childlike questions, perhaps she couldn't help but talk due to her anxiety. As we chatted away, we eventually arrived at the station where her mother was. Right after getting there, we found her mother, who was looking for her daughter at the same station, and I was able to safely return the girl to her. I'm sorry for bothering you. The lady apologized. It's no big deal, I responded with a smile. When I asked her about the situation, she explained, I misunderstood the station where my daughter was supposed to get off, and she got off alone. Asking the girl lightly about it, she said, I didn't know which train goes to the same station as Mom. It seemed that this misunderstanding was the cause of her getting lost. I guess that the reason she got on the wrong train was likely due to a lack of clear communication. Anyway, I felt relieved that I could safely reunite the girl with her mother. Just as I was taking a breath of relief, my phone rang. The caller was Mr. Smith. That's right. I was in the middle of heading to our meeting. Even though he hadn't arrived on time, by now he must be at the meeting place. He was probably very angry. Apprehensively, I answered the phone. Where are you? As expected, he started off by shouting. It was clear over the phone that he was furious about me not being at the meeting place. I knew explaining the situation to him wouldn't help, so I just kept apologizing and quickly made my way back to the meeting spot. In the end, I ended up being late for the business meeting that day. The client laughed it off and forgave me, but my boss, Mr. Smith, lectured me the whole time. But even so, I couldn't bring myself to think that I should have ignored the crying girl in that situation. Although I ended up inconveniencing the client, which I should reflect on, if I had abandoned that girl, I might have felt ashamed for the rest of my life. That's why me being late wasn't a big deal after all. Even though I was afraid, I felt a sense of pride in having been able to help someone, and I found myself thinking about that. The next day, an unexpected situation unfolded. I was suddenly called to the CEO's office. Why me? I headed to his office with a billion question marks on my mind. Excuse me, I said as I approached the CEO's desk. The atmosphere was surprisingly heavy and oppressive. As I entered, he stood up, took a breath, and then uttered something unbelievable. Michael, you don't need to come here anymore. I was abruptly told I was fired. This was completely unexpected, and my mind went blank. Why? I want to know the reason. I had pride in my hard work and asked him for the reason behind my dismissal. Then he began about yesterday's incident. Apparently, Mr. Smith had told him something, and that content was, my tardiness caused inconvenience to the client. And this was indeed true and beyond dispute. However, what Mr. Smith had told the president wasn't just that. He claimed that my tardiness wasn't a one-time occurrence but had happened repeatedly, many times. Furthermore, he said that despite his warnings, I didn't improve and he couldn't do anything about it. That's why I've decided to terminate your employment this time. If you can't improve even after being warned by a supervisor, there's nothing else to be done. He said this and sighed heavily. His expression showed he completely believed Mr. Smith's words without any doubt. In reality, it was the exact opposite. I thought to myself, but I kept these words to myself, thinking that it might be pointless to explain. I felt as if something inside me had snapped upon receiving this decision. I no longer had the confidence to continue working here, and more importantly, I felt no attraction to this company anymore. Leaving now seemed like the best timing. It was as if the other party had provided a push I couldn't give myself. I decided to resign. With a strangely clear mind, I accepted this decision. I packed up my things and went home that day. I got home several hours earlier than usual. As I walked home, lost in thought about what to do next, I encountered a familiar face. Hey, isn't that her? Standing bored at the edge of the road was the girl who had gotten lost the other day. Apparently, she was waiting for someone. I wondered what she was doing in this office district. I approached her a bit out of curiosity. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and she said with a laugh, "You finally came, mister." Was she waiting for me? Surprised and even more curious, I asked, "Aren't you lost the other day? What's going on?" "I'm not lost. I'm Emily," she said with a hearty laugh. This marked the start of our casual conversation. About 20 minutes must have passed when I decided to leave, saying, "Well then, see you." That's when the girl firmly grabbed my arm. She pulled me along to a certain place. It turned out to be in front of a black car parked in a coin parking lot. Realizing something was off, I tried to get away, but the girl clung on surprisingly tightly and wouldn't let go. I went along with the flow reluctantly, and this is how I was led to a famous, very high-end Chinese restaurant in the area. As I was led into a private room in the restaurant, still wondering why I was there, I saw the girl's mother and an unfamiliar man. He had a VIP aura with him, and for a good reason. This man turned out to be the chairman of a corporate group that included the company I had been working for. I was stunned and speechless when he handed me his business card. He chuckled and said, "My daughter was in your care the other day, wasn't she?" It turned out that the girl I had helped was the daughter of this influential person. This meeting was arranged as a way to thank me. I was confused and tried to make sense of the situation. The fact that I was brought here, not by invitation but almost forcibly, suggested that he had something to discuss. What could such an important figure want with a mere former employee like me? As the conversation unfolded, it naturally shifted towards work matters. Then, he said something completely unexpected. He asked, "Would you like to become my daughter's exclusive tutor?" "Why me?" I asked. The chairman smiled and said, "My daughter insists on having you. She won't take no for an answer." The girl, Emily, was also earnestly pleading with me at that moment. "Please, I really want you to." Her gaze was sincere. But, having just lost my job today, this offer felt like a godsend. It also sounded like an exciting opportunity. I gladly accepted the offer, saying, "I'll do my best to be a tutor she can be proud of." The chairman smiled and nodded in approval. Soon after, I started working as a tutor, learning the ropes from the chairman's secretary. 2 years have passed since I became a tutor. "Michael, look at this," Emily said, showing me her homemade cookies. "They're lovely. Very well done." I praised her as usual. "You don't really think so, do you?" No, it's a pleasure to see your growth up close. Every time your cookie-making skills improve, it fills me with joy." Emily smiled happily at our conversation. I, too, was deeply touched by these moments of happiness in my daily work. Now, 2 years into the job, I gradually began to engage in tasks beyond tutoring. My previous experience in international trade was proving to be useful. Understanding Japanese cultures and languages, I was often entrusted with arranging meetings and negotiations between the chairman and Japanese parties. Moreover, in such settings, my knowledge of alcohol from my previous job proved to be incredibly useful. I became the go-to person for setting up dinners and choosing menus. Recently, the selections of alcohol I made have been receiving compliments for their good taste, even from the other party. The chairman told me, "You are truly a dependable person," and I felt a real sense of accomplishment. By the way, major reforms were carried out at my former company. After I left, the company apparently started going downhill. In both transportation and sales, the impact of the upper management's sloppy business practices eventually became apparent. As complaints and contract terminations began to increase, the chairman took action. As a result, now, transportation, sales, and other operations seem to have come under the management of the group. This led to a number of layoffs. Additionally, many were demotioned. For example, lazy superiors, power abusers, incompetent executives. However, this change also brought many positive developments. Especially, unearthing capable young talents who had been underutilized was a significant achievement. The company seemed to refresh itself, becoming new and cleaner. One day, several years after I became a tutor, Emily, now a middle schooler, had a big fight with her parents. The chairman plans to make her the future leader of the company, so he intends to educate her strictly. But honestly, I don't think his training is that harsh. He's always been quite lenient with his daughter. From my perspective, it seemed like a slightly strict education. However, Emily greatly disliked this approach. Around winter, when she was constantly reminded about studying, she finally ran away from home. Normally, such a situation wouldn't occur when I'm around, but this happened when I was temporarily assisting the chairman. Hearing about this upon returning home, I reported to the chairman and then immediately dashed out to find her. I searched everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found nearby. With the temperature being so low, I was worried she might fall. Where did she go? If only I had listened to her more carefully, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Various thoughts filled my mind, all mixed with worry and guilt. As I was searching for her amidst these thoughts, a sudden bright light accompanied by a loud screeching noise shone on me. A car. I got it to move out of the way, but it was too late. Everything happened in a flash. While searching for Emily, I was struck by a car with a brake failure, resulting in an accident. I lost consciousness and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. When I woke up next, I found myself on a hospital bed, with a white ceiling expanding into my slowly clearing vision. Looking around groggily, I saw Emily, whom I had been searching for, sitting there with her textbook, apparently taking a nap. I was relieved that Emily was safe and alive. I tried to sit up, only to be hit by an excruciating pain like I'd never felt before. Despite realizing that I had sustained considerable injuries, I felt immensely relieved that she was safe. Emily woke up on hearing my pained voice. Our eyes met as she lifted her head. I smiled and half-jokingly asked, "So, have you had enough of running away from home?" Her eyes quickly filled with tears, and then she burst into tears and hugged me. She apologized while crying nonstop. She seemed full of self-blame, thinking that if she hadn't run away, this wouldn't have happened. I spoke up to comfort her, feeling like running away is something many people have experienced at least once. Wanting to be alone, to find a quiet place to calm down, to face one's faults and those of others, and to reflect. These experiences help us take a step towards adulthood. This runaway incident, if seen as a step on the stairs to adulthood, isn't entirely bad. But from now on, let's find ways to get along better together. As your tutor, I'll help too. Emily wiped her tears and nodded deeply in agreement. Yeah, the injuries I had weren't light, but thinking that this incident had strengthened our relationship made it feel not so bad. After that day, Emily started to approach her studies with an intensity beyond our imagination. She also began to lean on me like a little sister would with her older brother. It seems that day loosened the reservations we had towards each other. She also began to express her true feelings to her parents during tough times. It appeared to reduce the number of arguments with her family. Emily, I, and the chairman, we all seemed to understand the right and wrong actions to take. I was resolved to continue watching over her growth. By the way, the chairman always has a secretary by his side. She has been contributing to the group and the family much longer than I have. A serious woman who rarely changes her poker face, unless necessary. Her name is Olivia East. When I was a newcomer, she taught me a lot about the Hamilton family, and she's a couple of years older than me. She's perfect in every aspect of her job. Honestly, I've admired her from the start. Hoping to be like her someday, I worked hard every day. By the time Emily entered middle school, I think I have grown quite a bit as a tutor. The remarks and advice from Olivia had almost ceased by this time. Gradually, I became a reliable force in supporting the Hamilton family, trusted by those around me. However, this growth was somewhat sad for me. Whether it was her corrections or anything else, my interactions with Olivia had decreased. My initial admiration for her had turned into a romantic feeling. Then, one day, on a day when the chairman was busier than usual with work, I also helped with his and the secretary's tasks. Since Emily was at school, I had some free time. Compared to the secretary, I might have been less capable, but I worked earnestly, hoping to be of some help. On the way back that day, as everyone was leaving work, I noticed Olivia, who was also about to head home. It's rare for our commute times to overlap. This was undoubtedly a perfect opportunity to speak to her. I mustered up the courage to talk to her. "Good work today," she responded with a slight smile. My heart skipped a beat at her smile. I somehow managed to ask, "Would you like to have dinner together on our next day off?" Olivia showed a brief look of surprise but quickly regained her composure and said, "If I find the time, let's do that," and then she left. Was this a successful invitation to a date? I wasn't sure, but I was thrilled just to have gotten a response. However, it was hard to actually make a date happen. We were both busy, and it was difficult to find a time. But deep down, I was eager to ask her out on a date. During this time, Emily teasingly said to me, "You like Miss Olivia, don't you?" "What?" I blurted out in surprise. My reaction pretty much confirmed it. I realized I was already exposed. I candidly and a bit nervously admitted, "Yes, I do." Is it that obvious? It was super obvious. Even a middle schooler could see through me. My lack of experience in love was embarrassingly obvious. But Emily didn't laugh at me. Instead, she simply said, "I'll help you a bit." I was a little apprehensive about what she might do. Emily's face lit up with excitement, though. Later, I was called by the chairman. Having been fired before, I couldn't help but feel anxious. I had no idea why I was called, but naturally, I started to reflect on my work as I headed there. However, the chairman only talked to me about a raise and discussed holidays. The terms are the same as before, with a full 2 days off each week. "What do you think?" he proposed. What could I say? The conditions offered this time were much better. There was no reason for me to decline such a generous offer. I gratefully accepted and resolved to work even harder on my working days. And this new work arrangement brought a change. Most importantly, with more days off, I was finally able to go out for a meal with Olivia. It seemed she had also been talked to about the holidays. Both of us having more free time allowed us to enrich our private lives. I bet this was Emily's doing. I thought of the clever strategist with fondness. I knew I would always be grateful to her. During the meal with Olivia, we engaged in various casual conversations. One thing became clear. We had surprisingly good conversational chemistry. We lost track of time before, during, and after the meal, talking about each other. Our experiences up to that point were quite different, so it was really enjoyable to listen to her. And as we were parting, Olivia said, "Let's do this again." That phrase meant a lot to me. As if I was on cloud 9, I eagerly responded, "Definitely." As we continued to dine out frequently, we also began to go shopping together. I learned that Olivia usually didn't dress up much. She was interested but didn't know how to go about it. Seizing the opportunity, I suggested we go shopping for clothes. At the store, I helped her pick out clothes and tried them on her. She looked incredibly beautiful. She transformed from a strict and intelligent beauty to a shy but adorable lady in her new outfit. Olivia's charm was overflowing. I found myself increasingly drawn to her. When Olivia and I had grown significantly closer, Emily asked us, "Are you two dating?" She noticed how happy I had been and how Olivia had smiled more frequently. Olivia blushed and stammered in her reply to that question. Her inability to outright deny it made me wonder if she was conscious of me too. It made my day. Half a year passed since we began to be keenly aware of each other. I couldn't hold back my feelings any longer. "I like you. Will you go out with me?" It's a common phrase, but it was the first time I had ever said it. Olivia was visibly embarrassed but looked at me and said, "Yes." From that day, we became a couple, continuing to dedicate ourselves to the Hamilton family. Of course, everyone probably knew about our relationship, but the chairman and his wife never said anything, except for one person. Yes, Emily. She was particularly curious about our progress. "Where did you go on your date? What will you give her for her birthday? What are your plans for Christmas?" And so on. When I asked her if she was curious, Emily replied, "I want to use it as a reference." That means, has this young lady developed an interest in someone? Having been with her for a long time and watched over her, the thought made me feel both happy and a little sad. But still, thinking of it as part of her growth, I was glad. The skills we acquire today will undoubtedly be useful someday. Even if that time doesn't always come immediately, I still believe that day will come when we encounter that miraculous moment and seize what lies ahead. I want to ensure that I am well prepared for those challenges by further developing my strengths from now on.